Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Mrs. Mummy Penny Talks. And another guest this week. So, season 4 has been all about celebrating chapters from my book. Let's grab a copy and do a promotion from the beginning. Oh, I love that. How cool is that? We're matching. Yes, I have my incredible friends, Pete, Matthew, in from Meaningful Money.
Hello.
Talk to us about actually quite a few things we're going to talk about, because Pete is a guru. That's quite a word I'm using.
It is
there.
Slightly worrying.
It's like religious connotations, isn't it? Yeah. I think in the financial world, you are, though, one of the most highly respected, probably the most respected financial expert in the country, maybe after Martin Lewis.
Yeah, well, hopefully. That's very kind of you. That's yeah. If I could, I'm after the UK's Dave Ramsey. That's what I want to be.
I think you're better than him. Oh my gosh! Let's start with the controversy from the beginning.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Anyway, talk about that later.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So you're podcaster, YouTuber. You've got the Meaningful Academy. You also have a day job where you run a financial planning firm in Penzance, where I'm from, where you now live. I think once I left when you got there, so we swapped
pretty much, I think. Yeah.
Penzance. So yeah, and you live about 200 meters away from my sister, which is very bizarre.
It is small world, isn't it? Yeah, I married a Cornish girl, so that's why I'm down here from Yorkshire originally, so a long way from home, but this is home for me now. So wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I love it.
Yeah, it's I don't know what I'll do eventually. I'll maybe come home. I always struggle with the fact that it's so far away from
anywhere.
It
really is.
Like, for me to drive to Penzance, so I live 300 miles away from Penzance via Stonehenge. It's I can do it in 5 hours if I pelt it, and that's probably driving over the limit, which is illegal. So
you're not going to admit to that online.
No, exactly. But you've got this incredible empire, and I suppose maybe talk about the podcast and the YouTube, because those are the things. Like, your podcast has been around forever and it's very, very popular. I have been on it twice.
You have?
Talking about my book, and what else? I think I just came on to talk about how I made money, didn't I?
Yeah, I did a season on, but spent ages and hundreds of episodes telling people how to manage their money, but no time at all telling people how to make it or suggesting ways for making it. So I had a sort of shortish season where I just asked a bunch of friends who had great businesses that they were building themselves, largely online, but not entirely. And, so you were part of that. And then, a bit more recently, obviously, to talk about the book.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm up to 430 odd episodes now since November of 2012. So,
and how many downloads?
I'm about a fortnight away from 5 million downloads, which is a big number.
That's a big number.
It is in the podcast space. That's a very big number. So it's been a lot of work, but it's I'm still not having a blast doing it. So
yeah, and what I love, and actually I've totally copied your strategy. You do you change up each season, so it's all, each season's got a different theme, and like sometimes the seasons I love them, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's relevant, sometimes it isn't. But your latest season, you've buddied up with your mate,
my best mate, your
best mate, and it's a really good season. So
the great thing about podcasts is that you're meant to be able to dip in and out. Not every episode, not every season is going to be for everybody. So it's kind of curated radio, isn't it? So you can say, you look at an episode title and think, nah, that's not for me. I'll skip that one and check in next week.
Yeah.
But this season, well, selfish reasons for bringing Rog on board is that I don't have to script so much, because we can just bounce off each other, and that's freed me up time to write for YouTube, which I wanted to sort of focus on for a bit. So, and that's working too.
Tell us what's happened with YouTube.
YouTube appears to have gone a bit nuts. So bear in mind, I started on YouTube in 2010, uploaded my first video in April 2010. got. I mean, nobody was watching for ages.
But your first video is amazing because so I used to hang out at Battery Rocks, drinking with my mates when I was like 15, 16. And your first video is filmed at Battery Rocks in Penzance.
Exactly. But about 7:30 in the morning, no teenagers drinking at that point. But it's so it's a long way from there. But YouTube didn't really get any traction for ages. For me, the podcast has been the breakout medium, but I've always loved YouTube. And I've always, and really studied what works on there. Decided a couple of months ago to really sort of go all in and really spend time optimizing video and keywords and all the stuff you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that's really gone nuts. So, I mean, it's bizarre. So I've been on YouTube since 2010. My total number of views across all 550 odd videos is 1.3 million, of which a quarter of those views have happened in the last 28 days. So it's just like this weird hockey stick thing. So I've had sort of generally pottering along for ages, and it's just now gone nuts, which is really exciting. So I'm adding about 400 subscribers a day at the minute. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to my silver plaque, which is 100,000. So by the end of next year, that's what we're after. I
interviewed Jen Kempson, Mama Furfur.
Legend.
Yes, we both know her very well, and she's not far off her silver plaque. No. So she's really excited.
She deserves it. She's a superstar.
She's really good, because what I will say, and this podcast, we were always going to meander because it's just what we do. And that's just, if you don't like it, switch off.
Yeah,
but you will like it because we're funny. There are lots of really quite dodgy financial people on YouTube, which I know that you're very passionate about dispelling that. And TikTok as well, and Instagram. There's all these people out there who do not know what they're talking about.
Nope.
They're probably sponsored by brands. They're getting, kickbacks, affiliate stuff, and they're not declaring it properly, and they don't know what they're talking about. No. So you really have to be careful with the stuff you see online. And like, if I'm really honest, the only people who I trust for my own personal, consumption of financial stuff is, so Jen Kempson, Mama Furfur, you, obviously, Damien from Money to the Masses. And if I'm honest, that's it.
Yeah, you've got to pick and choose. It's really hard for lay people to know, though. So how do you know I'm talking sense? It's like, okay, so I'm a chartered financial planner, so I do have qualifications. I've got 20 odd years experience with real people managing their wealth and all that sort of stuff. But, that might be true. But there's plenty of people on YouTube who, have built their wealth by earning massive incomes in the city. That's fine. Doesn't necessarily make him a good investor, though. Or so it can be really hard to pull apart the charlatans from those who know what they're doing. Yeah, you can get a sense sometimes based on what they're pitching. You should always ask, okay, what's in it for the person doing the video? And so if you're watching me, it's like, well, okay, yeah, I have a financial planning practice. The stuff I do on the podcast and video does bring in clients to me.
Yeah.
But, and yes, I have been sponsored in the past. I do have an affiliate arrangement with LifeSearch, for instance, for life insurance. So, it started as a hobby, but it isn't now.
Yeah.
But I never recommend anything I don't believe in personally. I never would be sponsored by anything that I didn't believe in personally or anything like that. So, but I do think people's sort of censor for
bullshit.
Well, thank you. I thought I'd let you say it rather than be the first one to swear. I do think people's bullshit sort of censors are getting more attuned, but there's still a lot of charlatans out there who are pulling the wool over too many people's eyes.
Yes, particularly when it comes to cryptocurrency. But
I mean, it's the Wild West, isn't it, crypto? It's still so young. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced it has a place, but it's not for the faint-hearted, and it's not something to go into without a lot of thought and preparation. It really is the Wild West. We're talking potential 100% loss on anything you put in. So as long as you're aware of that and don't invest anything you're prepared to lose, then that's fine. But you got to go in with your eyes open. But it's just being trumped as a sort of, look, get rich quick That doesn't exist anywhere, by the way. Get rich quick, right? No, not for ordinary people. It doesn't. So, anything that's being trumped as a get rich quick or the answer or the only thing that counts going forward. Interestingly, the only spam comments I got on YouTube are about crypto, people trying to sell crypto trading ideas and all that sort of stuff. So that tells you something.
Yeah, I probably get, so on every single day on Instagram. So Instagram's my biggest platform.
Yeah.
Particularly in the money sphere. There's not many people that have 15,000 Instagram followers, but I will get a crypto person trying to dupe me, trying to contact me, and I'll get porn.
Yeah.
Every day. It's tiresome, but at least it's my DMs, it's not.
Exactly. I've tried to stop sending you those links, so I'm really, really sorry.
Thanks, Pete. So right, let's get into the content, because there's one big thing that I want us to talk about, which is savings and investment, but I also want to touch on wills to start off with, and then we'll touch on pensions a little bit at the end. So that's how we'll bookend it. So episode 10, which was the one before you, Pete, was where I interviewed Catherine Knowles, again, another mutual friend. We all know each other in the
exactly.
world.
I love Catherine. She's a genius.
She is a genius, and she spoke eloquently and passionately about protection, so life insurance, income protection insurance, and critical illness insurance, which is, I know, a subject that we're both very passionate about, and it's the first stage of longer term financial planning, protecting your future, because before you get into the world of heavy savings and investments and pensions, you have to protect things that are in place. So that's why I started with protection. But we ran out of time to talk about wills, so I'd like to talk a little bit with you about wills, because obviously you know a lot about it, and it's a subject very sort of close to my heart, because my dad died without a will when I was 19, and that didn't make me take out a will. I've only just written a will 2 years ago, because I think it just filled me with fear.
Yeah, it does for a lot of people, because you have to think about some stuff that we'd all rather not think about, but it is part of adulting, unfortunately. And like so many things that we have to do that we don't want to do, like pay house insurance and pay tax and stuff, it's just part of watching our carb intake. These are the things that we have to do as adults, but not easy for sure, but it's almost like it's part of the framework for having any kind of wealth. And I sometimes hesitate to use the word wealth, because it has sort of super rich connotations, but really wealth is just freedom. So if you're wanting to one day not have to work, then we're all trying to just store a bit away for the future, right? And if that future gets taken away from us by an early demise, then at least you want to have some control over how it's distributed. And that's all a will is, really. It is binding, of course. And so thinking about that stuff ahead of time isn't fun, but actually, it's not like you have to do it every day. It's a case of saying, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to tick it off. And it's a huge weight off when you do, because we all know we should get around to it. So when you do, it's like, take that off, I'm going to have a glass of wine.
Yeah, and it's something that you can do as a one-off, but whenever there's a big situation change, you need to change your will. So so I'll go back to my dad's story, because it's very relevant. So he died when I was 19, so he was 63. My mum had already died. Everybody knows this. So her life insurance and her assets passed to my dad. And then, but unfortunately, no, I shouldn't, whatever, I've said it now. He remarried in between my mum and my dad dying. And because he died without a will, and we're talking, this was 1996. He had, let's make up numbers, there was about 150, 180 grand in his estate, which is actually quite a lot of money back in 1996. But the government rules, and I'm using Lynn language here, I know there are proper words you should use, but that it all just went to his spouse. Like, what about me, who was a 19-year-old at university, and and I've also got 2 older siblings, which I mean they're different, but yeah, it was a bit of a tricky situation because my dad just had a heart attack and died. He was a healthy man, like he was in the army and in the MOD. He had medicals done every year. There was nothing wrong with him.
And then just switch off. It's we don't know when it's coming, do we? And we talk about control. If you don't take control, then somebody else will do it for you. And that's what the government rules, the laws of intestacy, they're called. If you die without a will, you're said to have died intestate.
Yeah.
Well, there are rules. So it's like, okay, if you die without a will, then here is a default flow chart of what will happen with your assets. Is there a spouse? Yes or no? Depending on whether there is, they'll get so much. If there isn't, then, there's a whole flow chart that you have to go through. But that's government rules, not yours, whereas you get to choose if you make a will.
Yeah.
So it sounds easy, but it isn't, just because it forces us to think about stuff that we don't want to think about. It forces us to make difficult decisions. If you've got kids, it forces you to think about, well, actually, who would be guardians if I die, or if I and my partner die, if we're together, or whatever. These are questions you think, God, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to have to ask my brother-in-law and sister-in-law or whatever to say, well, will you look after our kids if Joe and I are hit by a bus? These are horrible conversations to have, but they're so important. But for most of us, making a will doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out ordeal. It really is, because for most of us, if we're married or in a relationship, it might be everything to each other. If we've got kids, they will usually factor in. We don't have kids, if we're single, then it's usually even easier. Maybe it goes to our parents, or it goes to our sisters and brothers, or whatever, or it can go to whoever the hell you like. It can go to the local charity, the RNLI down here in Cornwall, whatever. You get to choose. That's the point. But if you don't choose, somebody else will choose for you. And so it really is about control, and most of us like to be in control. And you don't have a control over a lot of things in death. So grasping this lever and, sort of pulling it how you want to, and making sure what happens to your money is what you want to happen is so important. But you only have to do it once, but you should review it. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
It's worth reviewing sort of periodically anyway, but definitely on a major life event. So if you get married, if you get divorced, new child comes along. So any relationship thing, or maybe you move house and that's there's a change in your living arrangements. These are the kind of life things which might trigger you to review your will. Definitely important to do that.
It's almost worth, I think this thought just came to me, like having book out an afternoon or a few hours where you have like a proper serious life admin sort out, where you maybe like for example, me at the moment, I don't have the right amount of life insurance in place, so I know I need to sort it out. And obviously the conversation with Catherine has prompted that. I do have a will in place that I did do after the divorce, but I did it before the decree absolute, so I probably should sort out my will again. But what I will say about sorting out a will is it's really simple to do, because there's all these wonderful online providers like
Farewell is one of them. Yeah, brilliant.
Beyond.life is another good one, same sort of thing as Farewell, and it's 90 quid or 100 quid.
Yeah, gone are the days where you have to pay 600 quid to a solicitor for this, because for most of us it's really simple, and so you only need a simple will. People say, well, can I write it myself? Well, the answer is yes, you can. Yes, you can write your own will, but there is a reason why wills are written how they are written. All right, we've got like 800 or 900 years of contract law in this country, and over that time, certain phrases have been tested in law to mean one thing and one thing only. They are sort of not ambiguous. They are clear as to what they mean. And the problem when people DIY wills is that sometimes they can bring in that ambiguity, that sort of uncertainty as to what their wishes actually were. So you might say, for example, I want to leave my estate to my children. Okay. Or what sometimes happens is I want to leave my estate to my daughter Ellie and my other daughter Kate, and then you have another kid, and then you don't update your will, and it's like, okay, well, third child isn't having anything because that's not what your will says. And so it's, oh, well, it'll sort itself out. I hear that all the time. Well, it'll sort itself out, won't it? So yeah, it will get sorted out, but it's probably not how you want it to be. So getting it written properly is important, but it doesn't have to cost you the earth, which is great. I mean, that's just one of the things I love about the internet. It's kind of democratized a lot of this stuff and made it accessible to ordinary people. You don't have to sit into a stuffy oak paneled sort of lawyer's office anymore and talk to a guy in a pinstripe suit about this stuff. You can speak on the phone or complete an online form and get a really, really tight, well-written will done for 90 quid. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And also a few people have said, because I've written about content on wills, a few people have said to me, but I don't have any money. But I'm like I've got things written in my will, like exactly what I want my funeral to look like.
Yeah, sure.
And what songs I want played at my funeral. I've even, this is me being quite controlling, I've even said I want people to wear colourful clothes rather than black. That you can put, and also like what's going to happen to Trev, my cat. There are other non-financial things you need to think about. You can put all of that into your will as well. So that's what I really liked about it.
I've heard of people putting their Gmail password in their wills, because we have digital assets these days. So I mean, my 1Password, so 1Password is a password manager type thing, so all my passwords are generated and stored in this app. I ain't got a clue what my Facebook password or even my bank password is, really, because they're all generated by this thing.
Right.
I only have to remember 1Password. I've got 700 and odd passwords in this thing. And if I drop dead tomorrow, somebody's going to have a hell of a job unwinding that. So the sort of master recovery thing for my 1Password account is with my will, so that whoever comes behind me can sort out all my online crap.
That's such a good idea, because my passwords are a total mess.
Digital assets, so much of our lives are online.
Particularly when you run a business as well, because Damien Money to the Masses has spoken to me about this before, of like, you've got to think about, when you own your own business like we do, you have to think about what on earth would happen to Mrs. Mummypenny or Meaningful Money if we died. It would just die with us, and it generates so much passive income.
And there's still bills to be paid, though, and it's a limited company in my case. I think it is in yours as well. That's got to be wound up properly. It's an asset that we own, so it needs to be wound up properly. People say, "Don't have any money. Is there any need to have a will?" It's like, well, you'd be surprised at what you do have, and it isn't just money. You're right; it's other kinds of asset. Pets, I haven't mentioned what should happen to my dog. I should perhaps do that. A side letter.
Amend your will.
So
right, I think that's enough on death and wills.
Just do it.
But a subject that we're both very passionate about, because we have to deal with it all the time. It's important. Right, so let's talk about savings and investments. And what I'd like to do is start, we're only going to talk about this in simple, basic terms, which Pete's quite an expert at doing, as am I. But I think we start with emergency funds and the importance of emergency funds all the way through to touch on LISAs and stocks and shares ISAs. I think those are probably the main areas.
Yeah, they are really. For most of us, we'll never need anything more than an ISA and a pension. So, why go further than that? If you're a super high earner and are able to put more than 60 grand a year away for the future, then we're in a whole different realm of stuff you can think about. And it doesn't apply to 98% of the population. So let's not spend too much time on that. Emergency fund is important. All it is, it's an accessible pot of money in a bank account somewhere that you can get your hands on immediately. It's not about building wealth. It's about putting a buffer between you and what the world might throw at you. So an unexpected MOT failure with $1.5 grand worth of welding has to be done to your house, to your car rather. Your boiler blows up or you lose your job. So you were talking with Catherine last time about protection, so income protection, life insurance and things like that. I consider the emergency fund to be part of that protection. And my dad was a minister, right? So I'm raised in church circles, and there is a Bible story about, it's a parable really that Jesus taught about two men, because there's only men in Bible times, and one built his house on rock, a solid foundation, and a storm came and the house was fine because it was built on rock. A foolish man built his house on sand. When the storm came and the waves came up, it was washed away. So if we are going to build anything, and you and I talk a lot about building wealth, building freedom for ourselves in the future, it's got to be built on a solid foundation. And, you can put money in ISAs and you can store money in pensions and things like that. But our biggest asset is our ability to earn an income, right? Yes. If you multiply your income, your annual income, by the number of years you'll be working throughout your career, it'll be probably for many of us a 7-figure number. For many of us, a multiple 7-figure, multiple millions even potentially. Now, none of us own things of that value. My house isn't worth £1 million by any stretch, right, in Penzance, but my ability to earn an income is worth that much. So we should insure it. That's what Catherine was talking about. But also part of that is just to say, okay, well, if I am made redundant tomorrow, my money isn't going to run out tomorrow, that I've got a few months worth of reserve that I can draw from.
Yeah.
That keys into something like income protection, because as I'm sure Catherine mentioned, with income protection, you have a deferred period. So you can delay the benefits starting and kicking in. Yeah. In that time, you can draw off your emergency fund, which makes the insurance cheaper, right? Yeah. So an emergency fund isn't rocket science. You can hold it in a bank account. You can hold it in a cash ISA if you want. It just needs to be accessible. I know some people keep their emergency fund in premium bonds. They can have the money back in their account.
I know a lot
2 or 3 days.
Do that, actually.
So, it's fine. It's not going to earn you very much. It's tax-free, but it's just money you can get at if you need it, because we all need it at some point. We've all had to dip into savings, haven't we?
Last January, I had to empty my entire emergency fund. And I keep about 10 grand in my emergency funds, which is probably 4 months of essential expenses. But I had to empty mine last January because, for reasons I won't disclose, my tax bill was higher than I expected it to be. And I was in the middle of a remortgage, buying my ex-husband out. And I couldn't take on any more debts because I was in the middle of a remortgage. So I had to empty my emergency fund, and I had to borrow 5 grand from 2 of my best friends. Yeah. I got myself into such a pickle, but thankfully, that emergency fund was there.
It was there. And because that's an emergency. It wasn't your fault. You know what I mean? Sometimes things get calculated differently, or our accountant that we rely on makes a mistake, or life happens, right? Divorce happens or whatever. And these things very often come together, these things, the universe isn't kind to us very often and sort of lets us cope with one thing at a time. Very often it's 2 or 3 things at a time. You go through divorce, you're in the middle of a remortgage and the car blows up. It's like, well, thanks very much, world. But that's what it's there for. It's a buffer between you and what the world might throw at you at any given time. So it's really, really important.
And it must be in place before you move on to the next stage of building wealth.
Well, yeah, because it's a foundation, right? That's why I think of it as a foundation, like building a house. Without it there, everything else can be swept away at a stroke, right? There's no point, you have lovely plans for the future. Oh, I'd love to retire when I'm 60. I want to travel the world for 10 years while I still got my strength. And then at 45, you get a multiple sclerosis diagnosis for something or whatever. And suddenly your entire future plans are wiped away at a stroke by something entirely out of your control. Insurance goes a long way to helping with that. The very short term stuff, that's what your emergency fund is for. And it's an incredible peace of mind that comes from having that stuff in place, because it's sort of, I will be okay. In almost every imaginable circumstance, I will be okay, and my kids and my wife will be okay.
Yeah,
really important. So for me,
and your dog,
and the dog, obviously. Yeah, my most important daughter, Maisie the Jack Russell. Yeah.
Don't play this back to your daughters.
Well, they know. Don't worry, they know where they are in the pecking order.
Oh, bless. So I was just going to quote something actually, which did come up in the podcast last week, but it's worth saying because Catherine quoted a statistic. Catherine runs an insurance company called Pura Insurance, who looks after quite complicated insurance cases. And she said there's a stat that the chances of you dying before the age of like mid 80s is 5% or something, like quite small. But the chances of you getting ill, like after the age of 40 or 50 or something, is and ill where it affects your income and you have to stop working for a bit, is 50%.
Yeah, that's scary, isn't it?
That's really scary.
I'm not sure I'd bet on those odds. You know, I'm not sure I'd bet my future on those odds. Would you? Toss of a coin? No way.
Absolutely no. That's black or red, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So no, in like emergency fund is a core essential. Income protection insurance for me is a core essential, but mine doesn't kick in till 3 months down the line because I've got my 3 months of emergency money.
Yeah, perfect.
But I remember when we first met and I started to get into the proper world of financial planning, because it's been an education for me. Like I've only sort of seriously, done it properly in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. I remember I had quite a lot of debt I was paying off, and I remember thinking, but I want to invest at the same time as paying off debt, because I like to run before I can walk. And I remember you always saying in podcasts that you really need to pay off the debt, then build up your emergency fund, then you can start investing. But that was really frustrating to me because I knew I could get a decent return. Well, 5% to be prudent, with my investments. And yeah, I was, but like I was paying off 16 grand's worth of debt in 2017. So it's almost like, what was I thinking? You need to.
What interest rate?
And it was all 0%. Actually.
Okay. So that's better. So at least it was restructured. So it was on a zero rate.
Yeah.
So by paying down debt in that case, you weren't essentially saving any money because you weren't paying interest on it, but you were losing, in inverted commas, a 5% or whatever return on your investing. That's always the sort of the challenge. And I get this question at least once a week, can I invest, particularly these days? I really want to dabble in crypto, but I've got 4.5 grand on my store card or whatever. And it's like, the thing with money, and it's like this in so many areas of our lives, and I because I'm a little bit overweight, I'm forever drawing analogies between building wealth and physical sort of health. And the problem is with splitting your focus like that is you end up doing something or nothing. You never really crack on with either. The debt takes ages to pay down. There's a real mental burden with debt hanging over you, which is not about percentages and APRs and all that sort of stuff. And neither do you really go all in on your wealth building. So you're kind of faffing around in both places, really. Generally, good things happen with our money when we're focused on a single area at a time. So yes, debt reduction, there's not that many ways to reduce debt, really. Have a sort of basic emergency fund. It only needs to be maybe 500 or 1,000 quid, just something behind you in case something kicks off. Then throw every extra penny you can at your debt and get rid of it as quickly as possible. You did that, I know. I've done that in the past as well. And then your emergency fund, you get your sort of debt-free, your 0 day or whatever, and you think, yes, great, we're off to the races. But it's like, no, just hold on a little bit.
Wait a bit.
Yeah, all that money you've been paying off debt just for a few months, whack that in your emergency fund. All right, don't spend it yet. Whack it in your emergency fund, because then you're far, far, far less likely to go back into debt if something happens to you. There's no point just getting free of debt only to go back in again because the car blows up or whatever. So that, focus is everything, but it's really tempting. Build wealth is the sort of sexy stuff, investing, all that stuff that's what really, it's exciting. And so I understand people's desire to do both, but it really good things come from laser focus on a particular thing at a time.
I put something on Instagram the other day. If you chase 2 rabbits, they will both run away.
You'll catch neither. That's right. It's true. It's really important.
Same applies to business as well, I think, which is maybe something you should listen to, Pete, is if you have too many focuses with your business, it's really difficult. Because I had a situation where so when Mrs. Mummy Penny started, it made no money. I was in loads of debt. I just quit this corporate job. Like I used to earn, I don't know, 70, 80 grand in my corporate job. And I walked away from that to nothing. I mean, I had some redundancy money, which, you know, paid the mortgage, which was meant to pay the mortgage for 2 years, but I spent it all far too quickly because I got carried away with all this money sat in my bank account. So yeah, I ended up in a load of debt and I was panicking. So Tesco's had a really good job available. It was like a marketing manager job. So it was my sort of skills, even though I am an accountant. And it was a good salary, 50 grand a year, whatever. And I went for the interview and they were like, we really want to give you a job, but you have to shut down Mrs. Mummypenny because there's a conflict of interest, because I was doing quite a lot of work for Aldi at the time.
Okay. that I can see has been a conflict, yeah.
Potentially, yeah. Because when I worked at EE, they said I wasn't allowed to do any telco work, but that was fine. So anyway, so I had this decision to make. Like, I've got these two things, guaranteed money, 50 grand with one, or do I this other thing that isn't earning any money but has this huge potential? And I had a discussion with my hypnotherapist, and at the time she was like, you just need to choose one of them. You can't do both. Well, you can't do both because Tesco have said you can't. So just choose the one that you think has got the most potential. So I chose Mrs. Mummypenny.
Good decision.
Well, turns out it was the right decision. It's earning more than that 50 grand salary now. So,
well, you know, it's a good mate of mine, Dave, from Join Up Dots podcast. His whole podcast is based on a quote from Steve Jobs, who said in, I think, a commencement speech that he gave, it's like, you know, if you look back on your life, you can see the dots joining up, but that's the only way you can see them. You can't see them going forward. You don't know what's going to happen, but you can see the dots join up when you look back. And that's one of those junction points in it. You could have gone either way. You could have gone to Tesco and closed down Mrs. Mummypenny.
Yeah.
Or you chose to, what I'm sure now in retrospect has been the right decision. So yeah, but focus is important. Why do you say I need to learn from this? Just because you think I'm too busy?
Yeah.
I've just hired somebody to focus on Jackson's for me, so it's fine.
Good.
Don't worry.
We have quite a lot of offline discussions about our respective businesses, and we moan and we share and we solutionize. That's a good word.
And we inspire each other, definitely.
Yeah, because I think we both suffer from overwhelm or have suffered from overwhelm in the past, to the point where it's affected our physical health and our mental health. Because running your own business, we're totally meandering. Running your own business is really difficult, and you've been going a little bit longer than me, but also it's a similar story, where I know that you didn't earn very much money in the early days, and all you were about was putting out content and learning.
A hobby.
A total hobby. And you know, the same for me. I think my first 2 years I earned nothing. My first proper year I went as a limited company, I turned over like 5 grand. My second year I turned over 18 grand, and it's sort of, you know, gone up from there. I'm not going to, I'm just about to VAT register, so that's where my business has gone.
That's a grim day in the life of most businesses. It's got to be done.
Yeah,
your accountant is good. Well,
handily, my person who is my boyfriend, is, I can now say that, he has just finished his accountancy exams, which are the same exams that I did in my 20s, but he's done them a bit later in life. I'm not dating a 25-year-old. And he's like, we can just do the VAT stuff together, because I am a qualified accountant and he's learned the really recent stuff. So I'm like, oh yeah, maybe.
Save yourself some money.
Yeah, because my accountant bills quite a lot now.
And mine.
Well, weep. Yours is huge.
Yeah. Well, yeah, makes me weep though, but you know, it's better that than a tax investigation.
Yeah, but a good accountant is worth their weight in gold.
Man,
they save you. Yes. They save you money. Yeah,
they do.
I will always say that, as I am an accountant. I saw a load of IFAs bashing accountants the other day on Twitter. And I didn't jump to like the accountant sort of defense, because I know that there's some atrocious accountants out there, but there's also some atrocious IFAs out there.
Oh, of course there are. Yeah, it's generalizations. Got a lot to
Yeah.
answer for, and it's like, I mean, yeah, we've all met good and bad in every profession. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And like, we're all professionals. Like, I had to do exams for like 2-3 years to become a, you know, SEMA accountant, just like you had to do exams to.
Yeah.
So we're the
I
same.
love to bash other professions though, which makes me cross.
Yeah.
It's not like we've covered ourselves in glory in the past, is it? Financial advice profession. It's got a lot to answer for. But anyway, there we go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
are we building on our emergency fund?
I think we'd got to investments, hadn't we?
Yeah, I mean, savings, if you
Oh yeah, what else can you do with savings?
well, not a lot. I mean,
Not
really,
much.
you don't need to keep much cash on hand. So not cash as in, you know, hard, the plastic, aren't they now? Banknotes and coins and stuff. You don't keep cash in your house. It's really not smart. But when I talk about cash as an advisor, I mean money which is not invested. So you don't need to keep any more cash than is necessary. What is necessary? Well, you know, if you've got, I don't know, a wedding you're going to pay for next year, don't invest that money, right? That needs to be on hand. You're going to spend it in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
If you're looking to buy a house and you're saving for a house deposit and you think, okay, we're getting to the point where we've got what we need, maybe don't invest that money, keep it in a bank account. That's what you and I mean when we talk about money held in cash. Bank and building society accounts, it ain't going to grow. Interest rates are terrible, but it's accessible and it's safe, right? That's the only reason you should keep money in cash. The story of my career is people holding way too much money in cash. And it's, you know, with rates where they are and inflation where it is, you are literally losing money every single year because stuff gets more expensive every year, but your money doesn't grow to match. And really, that's all investing is. It's converting your cash in the bank into an asset, something which will grow and produce an income. So investing is a word that, you know, if you're not used to it, or you're thinking, perhaps I should learn a bit about investing, it can seem like a scary word. Stocks and shares, well, that's risky, isn't it? Well, as ever, there's degrees and nuance with this, but investing is merely exchanging your money for something else that will grow and throw off an income. So that could be a property, for example. You take your money, you buy a property with it, usually borrow somebody else's money to help you. You buy a property with it, usually that property will go up over time. If you live in that property, obviously you get the benefit of a roof over your head. If it's a rental property, though, you'll get rental income off it. So the value of the house will grow, usually over time, and it will produce an income while you own it. So 2 bites of the cherry, which is really cool. Stocks and shares are just the same thing. So it might be a tiny slice of a company. That's all a share is. Marks and Sparks, Vodafone, Apple, Netflix, or whatever. There's millions of companies around the world, and you can buy tiny stakes in them. The value of that tiny stake should grow over the time if the company is well managed. And if it's profitable, it will produce an income. But with shares, you have to be careful, because if the company you invest in goes bust, you could lose everything. So obviously that's not a great outcome by any stretch, but actually you can mitigate about that quite easily by just owning a bunch of shares in lots of different companies. If you hold shares in Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Vodafone, Marks and Sparks, these big companies, if they all go bust, to be honest, losing the value of your shares is going to be the least of our worries, because we're probably like zombie apocalypse sort of stage, right? If all those companies go bust,
remember when Woolworths went bust?
Yeah, no, I mean, Ben,
that was a big deal.
It was, because it was a 100-odd-year-old company. Debenhams, more recently, just gone bust. 1880 something, I think, or 1860 something. Not all companies are eternal, but if you hold all your money in shares of a single company, that's a hell of a bet. That's a red or black bet. Again, I had a client who worked for Cable and Wireless his entire life, all around the world. Nobody's heard of Cable and Wireless these days, but they were like the cable operator, the communications company, going back 100 years or so. He had 180 grand in Cable and Wireless shares because he'd had share options and all that sort of stuff as he worked for them. I and my predecessor, who advised him before me, begged him to sell them, and he didn't. Cable and Wireless, had a succession of bad managers. His 180 grand became 8. £180,000 became £8,000. I
Oh,
eventually sold them. Eventually sold them for his widow about 27,000. But fortunately, he had significant other wealth, right? Which is another lesson about investing. Don't invest money you can't necessarily afford to lose, right? We got to sort of caveat that a little bit. But fortunately, he was able to sustain that loss. Right? Not most people wouldn't be. Yeah. But an investment in a single company's shares is a massive risk.
Yeah.
Investment risk, which is the bit that usually strikes fear into people if they don't understand, is actually quite easily managed. It's managed by spreading it around, and it's managed by time. The longer you invest over, the less likely you are to lose. Simple as that. So, and fortunately now, just as it's easy to get your will written for 90 quid online, there are brilliant services who will do all this spreading around for you. You literally just send the money in and they'll do it all for you. So it's not something to be afraid of, but really investing is just about building by the value of what you've bought going up and the income that it produces being recycled into buying more stuff. And you get the power of compounding, which is magic.
Yeah, no, that's a really good, simple explanation, actually, taking it right back to basics. So just to flesh it out a little bit, to give examples. So I am in the wealth building stage of my financial journey. And I sort of have to make this decision with my spare money. Do I put my money into my stocks and shares ISA, or do I put my spare money into my pension? And we've had this discussion so many times because Pete sort of helps me with my own personal finances.
That's it. I get asked that question all the time, and it's perhaps indicative.
That was your YouTube video that went mental.
Yeah, exactly. It's my most successful YouTube video. It's called Pension versus ISA, right? And it's only been up for 6 weeks and it's not 80,000 views. So clearly that struck a nerve. And I've been asked that question countless times over the years. If you're starting out cold, the answer to that question, should I pay into a pension or ISA? If you're starting out with nothing, assuming your emergency fund's in place, if you're working for somebody else, there will be a workplace pension scheme. You should join it. That's your job one, right? You should join it because you get free money from your employer and from the government. Instead of paying tax on some of your income, the government will put that tax into your pension and your employer will pay it. So it's a no-brainer. Join the workplace pension and put in the minimum needed to get an employer match, right? Some employers will match even more. You usually have to pay in 4% and the employer will put in 3%. But some employers will say, well, actually, if you pay in 5%, we'll put in 5%. If you pay in 10% of your earnings, we will. So get your employer match because it's free money otherwise. Once that's in place, any other spare money you might have should go into a stocks and shares ISA, right? So an ISA and a pension, they're just accounts, right? They're just a different kind of account. So think of them as boxes, right? And what differentiates one box from another are tax rules and access rules. So an ISA is tax-free forever. A pension is tax-free while the money's growing, but you will be taxed when you take money out. And an ISA you can access whenever, but a pension you can't access until you're 50 odd, right? So access and tax, those are the things that differentiate these accounts. As we said earlier on, most people only need an ISA and a pension. So an ISA is just an account. It's what's in it that makes it a stocks and shares ISA, as opposed to a cash ISA, which is just a bank account. So stocks and shares ISA, once you've joined your workplace pension, put money into a stocks and shares ISA, what really matters is what's inside that ISA. So I presume you want to talk about that as well.
Yeah, and we also need to touch on lifetime ISAs.
Lifetime ISA is a subset of the main sort of ISA family. There's a bunch of different ISA types, but a lifetime ISA is a special one where you can put up to £4,000 a year in, and the government will add 25% to whatever you put in. So if you put in £4,000, the government will add another £1,000 and make it up to £5,000, and you do that every year, right? You can only open one if you're less than 40 years old. So that's us out, Lynn. Right? And you can only pay into it until you're 50, but 25% free money from the government. The flip side to that is you can only access that money without penalty if you buy your first home or after age 60, right? So the free money comes at a price. You
Yeah.
get free money, but you're limited
That's
to your
quite
access.
restrictive, actually.
It is. So if you already owned your own home, you're probably, particularly if you're a high rate taxpayer, you're probably better off putting into a pension, but it's still a great vehicle.
Yeah.
Right. But you just understand you can't get it. You can get at it, but you will pay back all the bonus and then some.
And there's a lot of emotions involved in these decisions as well, because what money is all about, emotion and your money mindset and how you think and feel about it. And it's very personal. So what I do with my money is really different to what you do with your money. But I suppose because of the job, your Jackson's financial planning, that's your day job. You help people decide what to do with that money.
I mean, man alive, how long you got? So yes, money is a great servant, but a lousy master. You should not let it.
Oh, that's good.
You should not let it.
I'm gonna quote that.
Yeah, do. It's I don't think it's my own, but it's I don't know where I got it from.
The Bible.
But money is great. No, it isn't.
Oh.
Well, maybe, but not exactly. Money is great as long as you're the one calling the shots. So we use all kinds of things like that. You should never let the tax tail wag the dog. So don't do something for tax reasons that you wouldn't otherwise be happy with. So don't invest in a lifetime ISA because it's got a really great bonus. If you think, actually, I might want to take that money out pretty soon, there's no point. I just use an ordinary stocks and shares ISA where you haven't got those restrictions. Yeah. So everybody's different. My job as a financial planner is to help people sort of vocalize what they actually want to achieve in life, and then we organize their finances around that. So life becomes the master and money becomes a servant. That's really what it's all about. So, and a stocks and shares ISA is just an account. And in order, what we talked about, sort of reducing risk earlier on, in order to do that, you need to spread your money around. And the easiest way for ordinary folks like you and me to do that is to buy a fund. Yeah. Right? And a fund is merely a collection of stocks and shares which are managed for you, right? There's tons of detail we can get into, but there's no need really. No. Any decent sort of balanced fund which spreads your money around over different kinds of stuff. Look for words like balanced, maybe growth, maybe be wary of funds that are called adventurous or, or sort of sex and violence fund. Probably maybe avoid those. Anything which is sort of middle of the road is a good starting point. If you've never invested before, there's no point you taking a risk questionnaire because you won't be able to answer all the questions. Yeah. Right. If you've never invested before, it's a source of amazement to me that as an industry, we talk to people who've never invested before, and before we make recommendations, we make them sit an exam about what they feel about investment risk. Like, I don't know, ask me about, I don't know, the American Civil War. I know about as much about that as I do about investment risk if I've never invested before, right? So it's bonkers. So start with something middle of the road and learn, watch, see how it responds, and learn a bit about yourself as you do. So this is obviously a massive subject, but really people just need an emergency fund, a stocks and shares ISA, and a pension. And inside the ISA and the pension, just find a decent fund that will grow over time. And for the most part, you can forget about it. Your only job is to put in as much in as you can. And live a little bit as you're doing it.
Like I can mention brand names, but you can't. So slightly different regulations.
Yeah, I'm a regulated individual, so I have to be careful.
It's my view and my view only. And when I talk about brands, it's brands that I actually use. And I always declare if there's a financial arrangement. But yes, brands that I've used, and I know that I know that we're both very passionate about customer interface, which Vanguard doesn't have an app. Come on, it drives me mad. But Vanguard, really low fees, really great funds. I mean, you're only going to get Vanguard funds when you put money in there, but the funds, they're cheap. But
lots of pensions and lots of ISAs will offer you access to Vanguard funds. It's a great place to start.
That's true. So what if you go on a I don't want to overcomplicate things, but if you went on to AJ Bell,
Hargreaves Lansdown, Interactive Investor. These are just online providers.
Yeah.
Many of these will offer you access to a ton of different investment houses.
Yeah.
That can itself be a bit confusing. But usually these sites have got sort of like learning centers.
Yeah.
Do you know, then it's so important. We can, it's easy for us to say, do you know what, this is just too complex, I can't be honest, right? But is there anything more important than our own financial security in the future? So it's one of those things, actually, no, I'm going to need to step up here. And yeah, it ain't going to be the most sort of fun hour of my life, but I need to understand how a fund works and how does it grow and stuff like that. You know, anybody that's capable of listening and understanding what you and I are talking about now is entirely capable of doing that. It won't necessarily be great fun, but neither are a lot of things.
Yeah, but we're quite fun to listen to. So I think if you just listen to this podcast, which is probably going to be an hour now, then you sort of getting everything you need to know, because we're keeping.
Oh yeah, that's true. There is a ton of resources. You, me, and lots of others besides. We mentioned Damien, Damien and Andy at Money to the Masses, and Lauren and the rest of the team. They're great. They put out some really good stuff, and it's all really accessible.
Yeah.
So there is more places than ever. Mama Furfur we've mentioned as well. More places than ever to learn great stuff about money in a way that suits you. So we can't really put it off. We've got to step up. It's a part of adulting, as I keep telling my 21 and 18-year-old adult children.
We also need to touch on ethical investing a little bit,
yeah.
because it's something that I am very passionate about. So I have put all of my pension money into fossil fuel free.
Yeah.
So no fossil fuels, no tobacco, no weapons of mass destruction, because it was and companies who contravene the UN something or other. So that was really important to me, because those are my ethics. Like, I make day-to-day choices I drive a hybrid car. Okay, not quite electric, but I'm getting there. I recycle everything. I reduce my plastic usage. I try to eat vegan half the week. But yet my 100 grand pension was sat in a tracker fund invested in all these kind of oil companies, and that did not make me happy.
Yeah, it's a very personal thing, that. Right. So if that is important to you, and it's important to an increasing number of investors, which is great, because it will, I mean, politicians can talk in a room in Glasgow for 2 weeks every other year or whatever it is, but money talks. So if we all put our money behind the stuff that we believe in, then that will be an incredibly powerful force, probably the most powerful force for change. But if you think about the collective wealth of the Western ordinary folks, it's hundreds of trillions of dollars. So there's a lot of weight behind that. Fortunately, it's easier than ever to invest in line with your ethics. And one thing that we've seen is that coronavirus and all that sort of stuff has focused people's minds on this. You think, okay, maybe this is the planet kicking back at us or whatever, whether it's the way we're treating our planet and, the natural disasters and COVID and all that sort of stuff. We need to sort of put our money where our mouth is, or where our ethics are. And so it's easier than ever. So pretty much every platform, which is just an online admin system where you can get an ISA or whatever, they will all offer access to some ethical funds. Ethical largely can be broken down into two ways. It's either avoiding the bad stuff or promoting the good stuff, or both. Right. So you've talked about avoiding petrochemicals, munitions, tobacco. There are also funds which will promote global water accessibility, renewable fuels, all that sort of stuff. So again, it might require a bit of reading, but there are more options than ever before. It's easier than it's ever been to invest ethically, which is great. I think that's really exciting. Understand. It's important to understand, when we talked about risk, we talked about spreading your money over different kinds of stuff is a way of reducing risk. By definition, if you invest ethically, you are limiting your options, not massively, right? But there is a limiting factor. And so very often ethical funds will be slightly more volatile than their non-ethical counterparts, as a very generalized rule. But that's the price of ethical investing. Is worth paying if that's important to you. So
and I pay a little bit more for it as well. So
often
I think the fee was 0.95% rather than 0.75 or something.
Well, you pay more for fair trade coffee, don't you? And it's like, okay, actually it's worth paying.
I've got so I was up at COP26 last week. Very, very privileged to have that invite. And I was at an event with just the most inspirational, clever people you've ever spoken to in your life. I was like, can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm talking to these people, and that I'm invited as one of these minds. It was quite like pinch yourself.
Very cool.
Very cool. what I want to sort of get across, I think, in a lot of my content that I'm going to be putting out, well, I mean, I talk about environmental stuff anyway, is that being environmental and looking after the planet and, you know, impacting on climate change doesn't have to cost you a lot of money.
No, because it's
view that it's expensive, because a hybrid car, let's face facts, an electric car is more expensive than a petrol or a diesel car. But it doesn't have to be all the time. Like, I found some recycled bamboo toilet roll, which is cheaper than Aldi toilet roll.
Right. And not too scratchy.
No, it's really soft.
You're right. I mean, that's called the green premium, right? And it's like, if it costs you more to be ethical or to be environmental or whatever, but that premium is coming down in so many areas. So eventually it won't be there. And that's when real change will happen, I'm sure.
Yes. And I just want to touch on, maybe before we close off, because we've got 10 minutes, or 5 minutes, that money talks. I think in changing the world, macro, bigger picture, money does talk. I think micro, though, as in what I'm doing, what you're doing, and what all of our watchers and listeners are doing, you as you've said, you have the power to control your money, not let the money control you. And you just go through these, they are basic steps of pay off your debt, build up your emergency funds, then provide for your future into investments and pensions, but also live your life for now, because who knows what's going to happen. Like, have some fun when you're younger, particularly before you have children, because I just don't obsess about money, which I know it's our jobs, it's all we do is talk about money, but like, you have a life to live as well.
Yeah, you do. It comes back to money being a great servant but a lousy master. I spend all my time talking to my clients about them, not their money.
Yes.
Right. So the longer I do my job, the more I realize that actually I'm more coach, maybe even psychotherapist at times.
Yeah.
Because people let their money hold them back from what they really want to do. It's just a major source of anxiety for many people, even very wealthy people. You know, having more money doesn't reduce the stress of it. Sometimes it can increase it. So, you know, it's my job. People pay me to take on that for them and help them navigate the system. And, you know, very often I've advocated for people with their own family. You know, it's like, okay, you're saying you want your parents to do this with their money. They're thinking something different. You know, I've walked into banks with clients because, you know, clients have had a big amount of money dropped into their bank account. And the second they walk in the bank, they're all over them like a rash. Oh, would you like to see our advisor, sir? You know, and I've walked into banks and said, you know, no, she doesn't want to see anybody. You know, because it adds a lot of pressure, money. But what matters is life and family, relationships, health, happiness. The problem is money is a trigger, both positively and negative, for those things. So we've got to keep it in its place. And a massive part of that is understanding it, because if you can control it, it won't control you. And it actually is not difficult to control it. Not really. We think it is. We think there's tons of complexity around it, but actually there isn't. For most ordinary people, there isn't. And that's why you and I try and distill it down to these simple rules, these simple steps. You know, follow them one at a time and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It is as easy as that, really.
Yeah.
It's life that sometimes, and our own minds, that make it seem more complex than it is.
Yeah. That's a perfect place to end.
Cool.
That was amazing, as I knew it was always going to be. So how do people find you on the internet?
Search for Meaningful Money. You'll find it. So YouTube, podcasts, website, meaningfulmoney.tv is the website, but just search for Meaningful Money. You'll find me. I'm sure you'll put a link.
Of course, I will link to everything, because Pete also has a book. Have you got your book in front of you?
Up there, it's just out of reach.
On your bookshelf with all your money books.
Yeah, I got a lot of them in a row actually, which is a little bit.
Pete did a studio tour the other day on his YouTube channel, and you've never seen anything like it. Like a boy.
Is there anything more
boy.
self-indulgent? It is a bit of a man cave, I'm afraid, but it's. I spent a long time building this up, you understand, but it's my happy place, which is good. I spend enough time in here. I was going to have it so nice, hence the spookily backlit sort of brushed aluminium logo up here. It's great. So yeah, I have a book called The Mean for Money Handbook, which is basically the distillation of everything I've learned in 20 odd years of helping other people with their finances and sorting my own out as well. And it all comes from that same point. I'm like you, Lynn. I love what I do because I see the difference it makes in people's lives. And so I would do it for free. I'm amazed every day that people pay me to do this stuff. So, you know, how blessed am I? You know, so
but the book, I think the book is a really great, and it's the exact same reasons why we both wrote books. If somebody wants to access all of your information, they can pay 10 quid or whatever and buy it off Amazon.
Distilled. Yeah, probably half that, and get it in distilled form. You know, I mean, there's 450 podcast episodes, 550 videos. That's a lot of your time, but the book is the distillation of it.
Yeah. And yeah. Cool. Can I just say that I'm actually on the back of your book as a recommendation, and you are on the back of mine.
I know. That's true. Yeah, I forgot about that. Well, there you go.
From the heart and from real gritty experience, this book is crammed with actionable tips to help turn your financial life around. Highly recommended. Pete Matthew, founder of Meaningful Money. Boom.
I must love you.
Yes, it's the Penzance thing.
It's all true. Yeah. And it's true.
Yes. And it's true. Yes, we do love each other. Right. Thank you ever so much. Was there anything else I need to say? Oh, the next episode, I just need to say that's Romy Savova, CEO of Pension Bee, where we will be talking a lot about pensions. So we've obviously flowed into pensions a little bit, but yeah, that was amazing. Thank you ever so much, Pete. And don't go.